That night, the gallery pulsed with soft conversation and the clink of wine glasses, but I barely heard any of it. Paige's work always had that effect on me. Her paintings were bold, brazen even, but with layers that pulled you in the longer you stared. Vibrant reds, fractured blues, silhouettes tangled in emotional tension. Just like her, I stood before one of her pieces, a swirl of chaos and color, wondering if she'd painted it in one of her moods. Those bursts of raw honesty that made her both fascinating and, frankly, intimidating. Paige was Brooke's younger sister, but everything about her felt older, sharper. Where Brooke had always been soft edges and perfect timing, Paige was unpredictable fire. I was just about to move on when I caught something strange, a low laugh behind me, muffled by the wall dividing the gallery space from the bar. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I swear. I was reaching for a new wine when the words stopped me cold. She says she's still married, but come on. You think she spends those late nights at yoga class? A man chuckled, his voice cocky, familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten. Brooke knows exactly what she's doing. Another voice, a woman this time, breathy with amusement. You're such an asshole. That's your brother's wife. There was a pause. Doesn't stop her from riding me like I'm not. I froze, wine glass halfway to my lips. My throat dried instantly, and it wasn't the wine. It was the name. Brooke. And riding me like I'm not? No. No way. It couldn't be. I stepped back into the shadows between two exhibits, heart hammering, every nerve straining toward the conversation. They were around the corner, laughing again, oblivious. You better pray he doesn't find out, the woman said. That man looks like he'd implode if he ever got betrayed. The man let out a slow exhale. He won't. Brooke's careful. She deletes everything. And besides, it's not like Kyle has a clue. Kyle. Me. That name landed like a slap. The voice, I heard it clearly now. It was Justin. My brother. My fucking brother. I felt a strange detachment as I stood there, like I'd fallen into someone else's life. The hum of the gallery, the soft jazz floating through the speakers, the distant laughter, it all blurred into a low, dull throb behind the white-hot pressure building in my chest. The irony hit me like a punch. I came here to support Paige. To show my family I still cared about their passions, even when mine felt like they were crumbling. Brooke had been too tired to come. She kissed me goodbye with those soft lips I'd loved since college, murmured something about needing rest. Rest, right? I slipped out through the back door of the gallery, the night air slapping my face sharp and cold. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I walked aimlessly through downtown, the lights blurring past like streaks on a canvas I couldn't quite interpret. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too numb. I replayed it all in my head. The late yoga classes, the way she clung to her phone, the sudden shifts in her mood, guilt masked as irritation. The time she'd said Justin stopped by for a beer while I was out, the way he smirked when I asked about it, like I was too stupid to read between the lines. My own brother, the man who gave a speech at my wedding, who held my shoulder when my dad died, who knew every moment of weakness I'd shared and used them to worm his way into her bed. I didn't go back into the gallery. I didn't say a word to Paige. I just walked, and when I finally got back to my car, my hands shook as I gripped the wheel. I sat there in the dark, headlights off, heart cracked and raw, listening to the silence like it might offer me an answer. But all it did was echo with their laughter. That night, I didn't confront anyone. I didn't scream. I didn't kick in the door or throw accusations like knives. I went home and pretended I was still whole. Because sometimes, when the foundation of everything you believe in shifts all at once, all you can do is survive the tremor and wait for the dust to settle. But I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. You don't want to believe it. Not really. Even after hearing his voice, those words, the certainty behind them, some part of me clung to the idea that maybe I misheard. Maybe it wasn't Brooke. Maybe it wasn't Justin. But that part of me, the innocent, trusting part, was already starting to die. The next morning, I sat across from Brooke at the kitchen island, pretending everything was fine while my insides were caving in. She was sipping her almond milk latte, scrolling through her phone with her perfect manicure, bare legs folded beneath her oversized t-shirt, my t-shirt, ironically. She looked up and gave me that casual, warm smile. The kind I used to live for. You okay? You seem quiet today. Just tired. I lied, forcing a weak smile back. And then I kissed her cheek like I hadn't heard what I heard. Like I didn't already feel the weight of betrayal burrowing into my chest like a parasite. I spent that entire weekend in a fog. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed more than words floating out of the shadows. I needed proof. Cold, hard, undeniable. Because when the time came, I didn't want her to weasel her way out of it. I didn't want to leave even an inch of space for manipulation. So I started watching. I knew her passcode. It hadn't changed in years. Brooke was smart, but not paranoid. She'd never had a reason to hide anything from me. Until now. While she showered on Sunday night, I slipped her phone from the charger, unlocked it, and started scrolling. Nothing. Her messages with Justin were clean. Too clean. Deleted. My stomach dropped. It was almost worse than finding something. The absence said everything. Then I remembered. Backup. I grabbed my own laptop, logged into our shared Apple account, and navigated to the cloud. My hands were sweating as I clicked through the interface. Photos, locations, backups. There. I found an older backup from 3 weeks ago, just before she'd done one of her mysterious yoga retreats. I restored the messages to an old spare phone I kept for travel. What I read left me paralyzed. You still taste like last night. I told Kyle I had a late client meeting. I'm on my way to your place. I hate lying, but God, I can't stop thinking about you. I had to close the phone and walk away. My chest was tight, every breath ragged like I'd been running for hours. It was real, and it had been going on for months. Worse yet, it wasn't just sex. There were messages full of inside jokes, pet names, emotional intimacy. She confided in him about our marriage, our fights, my job stress, even the way I liked to hold her in my sleep. That's what broke me most. She took the quiet, sacred things we built over a decade together and laid them bare for him to devour. The betrayal was multi-layered. I wasn't just being cheated on, I was being replaced. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay beside her, our bodies inches apart, while the truth throbbed behind my eyes. She rolled over in her sleep, draping her arm across my chest like she used to. The weight of it felt foreign now, like it didn't belong to her anymore. I stayed still, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she whispered his name when she came, wondering if he touched her differently, better, wondering if he loved her, if she loved him. The next day, while she was out running errands, I checked her phone bills. The records made me sick. Calls and texts every single day. Some lasting hours. The night she claimed she was visiting her mom for dinner, she was at Justin's place, confirmed by a shared location ping she'd forgotten to disable. Justin, my little brother, my best man, the guy I used to bail out of messes when we were kids, the same one I taught how to shave and talk to girls, the guy who once told me, with tears in his eyes, that he looked up to me more than anyone else in the world. I wanted to punch something. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go to his condo, break his fucking door down, and drag him into the street. But I didn't, because I was still thinking, still planning, still bleeding. I needed more than revenge. I needed clarity. And as messed up as it sounds, I needed to understand. Why her? Why him? Why now? I started collecting screenshots, location data, message history. I emailed it all to myself, creating a folder called Truth. Every time I added to it, I felt a strange blend of agony and power, like I was reclaiming control, piece by piece. The worst part? Brooke had no idea. She kissed me. She laughed at my jokes. She texted me, "I love you," before bed. The theater of our marriage went on uninterrupted, even as its foundation crumbled beneath us. Some nights I'd look at her and see the girl I fell in love with, the one who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen to Stevie Nicks or fall asleep on the couch halfway through a movie, mouth slightly open. And other nights, I saw a stranger, a woman who could fuck my brother and still come home, curl up beside me, and act like nothing had changed. I didn't know which version scared me more. But one thing became clear. If I wanted answers, I couldn't get them from her. I had to go to someone else. Someone who knew them both. Someone who, maybe, had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Paige. I hadn't seen Paige alone in over a year. We usually cross paths during holidays, family get-togethers, the occasional brunch Brooke hosted to keep up appearances. Paige always showed up late, a little dramatic in that artistic way. Messy hair, oversized sunglasses, that sensual little smirk that made people simultaneously intrigued and unsettled. She was like a puzzle you didn't know if you wanted to solve or just stare at forever. But now I needed her. At least, that's what I told myself. It wasn't like I was going to confess what I'd found. Not yet. No, I just needed to talk. I needed a window into Brooke's world that wasn't filtered through her carefully constructed lies. So, I texted her, "Hey, your exhibit the other night really stuck with me. Want to grab a drink sometime? I'd love to talk about your work. Maybe even buy something." The response came minutes later. "Wow, didn't expect you to reach out." "Sure. You free tomorrow night?" And that was that. I met her at a little wine bar tucked between a tattoo shop and a boutique that sold $400 candles. It was quiet, low lighting, faint jazz humming through the walls. She was already there when I walked in, hunched over a sketch pad with a glass of red and a cigarette tucked between her fingers like it belonged there. She looked up and smiled. "Kyle Whitmore. Never thought I'd see you in a place that doesn't serve craft beer and chicken wings." I smiled, awkward. I can be cultured when I try. She cocked an eyebrow. "So what's the occasion? This about Brooke?" The question hit harder than it should have. I took the seat across from her and forced a chuckle. "Actually, I was serious. Your art. That piece with the red and the mirror shards, it's been in my head ever since." She leaned back, arms crossing under her chest, drawing my attention for a beat too long. Her blouse was loose, half unbuttoned, revealing a subtle line of cleavage and a delicate silver chain that dipped between her collarbones. There was always a quiet sexuality to Paige, something she didn't flaunt but never hid either. She studied me, those sharp hazel eyes narrowing just enough. "You're not just here to talk about art." "No," I admitted. "Not entirely." She tilted her head, more curious now. "So talk." God, where did I even begin? I started with the safe stuff. Things have been tense at home. Brooke's distant. Always out. Always tired. I guess I'm just trying to make sense of it. Paige sipped her wine, watching me over the rim of her glass. "You think she's cheating?" The words slammed into my chest like a brick, even though I'd known it was coming. "Would you tell me if you thought she was?" I asked, eyes locked on hers. She looked away then, and something in her jaw twitched. "I don't know anything, Kyle. But Brooke's not who she used to be. Not lately. She's cold. Secretive. Even with me." I leaned in. "Has she ever mentioned Justin to you? Hanging out with him? Talking to him a lot?" That got her attention. She blinked, stunned. "Justin? Your brother Justin?" I nodded. "You've never seen them act different?" Paige stared at me like she was trying to untangle a knot that had just tightened in her mind. "Holy shit," she muttered. "Wait, are you saying?" "I'm not saying anything yet." I cut her off. "I'm just trying to see if I'm crazy or if something's actually happening behind my back." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The jazz hummed softly. Her sketch pad lay forgotten. Then, slowly, Paige reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm, soft, but there was steel beneath her touch. "You're not crazy." The words cracked something open inside me. Not just pain, but relief. Validation. My shoulders slumped, and I exhaled for the first time in what felt like days. Paige squeezed my hand gently. "I don't have proof, Kyle. But yeah, something's been off. I've seen the way she looks at her phone when you're not around. The weird excuses. The way she shuts down when I bring up family. I didn't want to assume, but damn, Justin." I nodded, and it was like I was finally sharing the weight with someone who could carry a part of it. Someone who wanted to. I just needed someone to talk to, I said quietly. "You picked the right person," she whispered back. Her thumb moved across the back of my hand, slow and comforting. Our eyes met, and there was something charged in the air. Not romantic yet, not even intentionally intimate, but undeniably alive. Like we were standing at the edge of something we weren't ready to name. "You know," she said, breaking the silence, "when I painted that mirror piece, I was going through a betrayal too. A guy I thought loved me slept with my roommate. I caught them in the middle of it. Literally. Jesus," I muttered. "I thought I'd never trust anyone again," she continued. "But then I realized art is the one thing people can't lie through. You paint how you feel, even if you don't mean to. That piece you liked? That was rage. Pure, hot betrayal. But it was also the start of healing. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. She looked at me for a long time, then leaned back, her hand slipping away from mine slowly, leaving a faint burn where our skin touched. "Come to my studio sometime," she said. "I'll show you how I work. You look like someone who needs to let something out." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, maybe I do." She smiled then, soft, unguarded. "Then maybe that's how this starts." The first time I visited Paige's studio, it felt like I was stepping into her mind. It was a small space above a row of aging shops on the east side, reachable by a creaky staircase that smelled faintly of oil paints and incense. The door was propped open, music drifting out. Fleetwood Mac, softly echoing through the hall, Stevie's voice melting into the walls like a confession. The place was a beautiful mess. Canvases lined every wall, some finished, some raw and violent in their incompleteness. Open paint tubes spilled across wooden tables. Mismatched brushes stuck out from a cracked mason jar. Light poured through the single window, casting amber streaks across a worn leather couch and the paint-stained floor. Paige stood at the far end of the room, barefoot in black jeans and a loose white tank top that exposed a line of freckles across her shoulder. Her hair was pulled up in that careless bun she always wore when she was focused. She didn't hear me come in until I closed the door behind me. She turned, brush in hand, and smiled. "You showed. I said I would." She motioned for me to sit while she stepped back from her canvas, wiping her hands on a towel that looked like it had survived a war. "I don't usually let people in here." "Why not?" "Because it's the only place where I don't lie to myself," she said, pausing before she added. "And sometimes that's not something I want witnessed." That stayed with me. I wandered the studio while she painted, occasionally glancing over at me with a look that hovered between curiosity and something warmer. I watched her work in silence, her brush strokes smooth, her movements almost meditative. There was something oddly arousing about it. The way she bit her lip when she was focused, how her whole body seemed to move with the rhythm of creation. "Ever paint your feelings?" she asked suddenly, looking over her shoulder. "I don't even know how to draw a stick figure." She smirked. "It's not about skill. It's about honesty." I hesitated. "Then no. I guess I haven't been honest in a long time." Paige turned and walked over to a fresh canvas resting on the table beside me. She picked up a spare brush and offered it to me. "Try." I looked at her, then the canvas. "What am I supposed to paint?" "Whatever you're afraid to say out loud." I didn't move. I didn't even reach for the brush. She stepped closer, her voice gentler now. "You're carrying so much, Kyle. You don't even realize how heavy it's gotten." My throat tightened. "I don't know what the rules are anymore," I admitted, my voice low. "I come home every day and pretend not to know what I know. I lie to Brooke. I lie to myself." I stare at her across the dinner table and wonder if I'm the crazy one for staying silent. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're surviving." I sat down on the edge of the couch, rubbing my hands together, eyes fixed on the paint-streaked floor. Paige sat beside me, not too close, but not far either. "She told me once," I said slowly, "that I was her safe place, that she could rest with me. And now, she's giving herself to my brother." Paige's jaw tightened. "Justin's a selfish prick." "You're not wrong." We sat in silence for a while, the music shifting to a softer ballad, something old and aching, the kind of song that made the air feel thick. Then she spoke again, her voice softer. "Why haven't you confronted her yet?" "Because I don't want to break," I whispered. "Because once I say it out loud, I can't ever unknow it. And part of me is still clinging to the man I used to be before I knew the truth." She turned toward me. "You don't have to be that man anymore." Her hand found mine again. No hesitation this time. No polite, calculative comfort. Just a warm, honest touch that felt like shelter. I looked at her, really looked at her. There was no pretense in her face. No jaiment. Just understanding. Shared pain. And something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet, but it lived in the space between us. Paige leaned in, slowly, like she was giving me time to pull away. But I didn't. I didn't move. I couldn't. Her lips brushed mine, not a kiss, not yet. Just the barest graze, like a question suspended in air. We lingered there, breath to breath, eyes half closed. I could feel her heartbeat in the way her fingers tightened around mine. But neither of us moved further. The moment was magnetic, powerful, but unfinished. She pulled back first, just enough to speak. I'm not trying to complicate your life, Kyle, but I also won't pretend like this, whatever this is, isn't happening. I don't know if I'm ready for anything, I said, voice cracking just slightly. That's okay, she said. I didn't ask for anything. I just wanted you to know you're not alone. I nodded, the weight in my chest shifting just enough to breathe again. I should go, I said, even though I didn't want to. Okay, she whispered, but come back when you're ready. I stood, hesitating by the door, then glanced back. She was already looking at me. That smirk, now softer, more vulnerable. You've got paint on your shirt, by the way. I looked down, a smear of red across my side, from where I'd leaned against the table. Must be rage, I muttered, and she laughed. But when I walked out into the night, it wasn't anger I felt. It was the first flicker of something else. Something dangerous. Something real. She knew. Not everything, not yet. But she knew something was off. It started with how she looked at me. Sideways glances when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Her usual feigned affection gave way to clipped sentences, cautious movements. The air in the house turned thick, as if both of us were waiting for the other to speak a truth neither wanted to hear. That morning, she sat at the table across from me, sipping her tea with forced calm. No muck-up, hair in a messy bun. Still beautiful. God, she always was, but her eyes gave her away. There was something wild behind them. Uncertain, guarded. You've been quiet lately, she said, not meeting my gaze. I shrugged. Work's been a lot. She nodded, but her lips pressed into a thin line. You've been sleeping on the edge of the bed, like you're afraid to touch me. I didn't respond. Just stir my coffee like it held the answers. Is there something going on? She asked, voice low. And there it was, the beginning of it. I looked up slowly, meeting her eyes for the first time in what felt like days. I could ask you the same. The color drained from her face so quickly, it was like watching the blood pull away from a wound. What? She whispered. You heard me. She blinked, mouth opening and closing without sound. Kyle, what are you saying? I stood slowly, walked around the table, and leaned on my hands, palms flat on the surface near her cup. You think I don't notice? The late nights. The fake yoga classes. The way you smile when Justin texts you and pretend it's from Paige or your mom. She froze. I continued, my voice steady, eerily calm. I know, Brooke. I've known for a while. There was silence. Just the low hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, and the sound of my own pulse in my ears. She stood too fast, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Kyle, it's not what you... Don't, I said. Please, just don't insult me like that. Her lips trembled, and for a second I saw the Brooke I used to know, scared, unsure, not yet defensive. But then the walls went up. She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. You went through my phone, she asked, voice tight. That's your response? I laughed bitterly. Not an apology, not even denial, just outrage that I figured it out. She didn't answer. I saw the messages, I said, from the cloud backup. I know everything. Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I thought she might collapse. How long? I asked. She sank back into the chair slowly, as if her legs could no longer hold her. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. A few months. I nodded once, jaw clenched. And you didn't stop, I said. You kept coming home, smiling in my face, fucking my brother, and then letting me hold you like nothing had changed. Tears pooled in her eyes now, but I couldn't find any sympathy for them. I didn't mean to fall into it, she whispered. It started stupid. He was just there. You were always so busy, so distant lately. Oh, don't you dare put this on me, I snapped. Don't you fucking dare. Her mouth shut, and the silence that followed was devastating. After a moment, she spoke again. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Brooke? I said, arms spread wide. Help me understand how the woman I loved for 10 years could look me in the eye and lie every single night. She shook her head. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was never supposed to get serious. But it did, I said. Didn't it? Brooke looked down, then nodded once. It felt like a knife. I turned away, pacing the kitchen like I could walk off the rage coiling through my body. I gave you everything, I said quietly. Time, loyalty, love. I never even looked at another woman. I know, she said, voice cracking. I protected you, I said louder now. I chose you. Even when things got hard, I never gave up on us. I didn't mean for it to get this far. But you didn't stop, I said. No. And there it was. The final nail. I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Does Justin love you? She didn't answer. Do you love him? I asked again, quieter. I don't know, she whispered. That broke me more than a yes would have. I nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the counter. She stepped toward me, reaching out. Kyle. I flinched before she could touch me. Don't, I said. Don't pretend like there's anything left for you to hold on to. Her hand dropped. She stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes full of something that might have once been regret. But it was too late for that now. I need space, I said. Time. I can't breathe with you in the house right now. She looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, and a moment later, I heard the bedroom door close softly behind her. I stood there, alone in the silence that followed, trying to remember what it felt like to believe in her. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. I hadn't planned on seeing Paige again so soon. But less than 2 days after the confrontation with Brooke, I got a text. She told me about everything. I stared at the message, numb. Then another came in. Meet me at the studio. Now, while I got there, Paige was pacing, paint on her hands, her tank top clinging to her skin in streaks of sweat and fury. Her whole body radiated tension, like she'd been holding in a scream for too long. As soon as she saw me, she didn't say hello. She didn't even let me close the door before blurting it out. She slept with him, she said, like it physically hurt to say. With Justin. I just nodded. She came to my apartment this morning. Said she needed someone to talk to. Paige scoffed. She actually fucking said she didn't expect it to last with him. Like that makes it better. Like she was just sampling. She ran both hands through her hair, pacing again. She didn't even apologize. Not really. She cried and made excuses and said I had no idea what it was like to feel unloved. Did she say why she told you now? I asked. Paige stopped, her eyes locking onto mine. Because she thought you already told me. And when she realized you hadn't, she tried to make me think you were keeping it from me, to manipulate me, to make me hate her. My jaw clenched. She stepped closer. Were you? I swallowed. No. She studied my face. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to hurt more than you had to, I said quietly. I figured if you hadn't noticed, maybe I could spare you some of it. Her voice dropped, cold and tired. I noticed. I just didn't want to believe it. The space between us suddenly felt charged. Her breath hitched like she wanted to say something else, but the words never came. I should have told you, I added. You deserve the truth. We stood in silence for a few beats, the sound of traffic outside muffled by thick windows and heavier emotions. Then, slowly, she walked toward me. Not fast, not dramatic, just quiet steps on the paint-stained floor, until we were standing toe-to-toe, close enough for me to feel the heat coming off her skin. I hate her for doing this, Paige said. I hate him more. I know. Her hand brushed against mine, accidental, but deliberate. I feel stupid, she whispered. You're not. Then why do I feel like all the good parts of me were ripped out when I wasn't looking? Her voice cracked on the last word, and something in me couldn't take it. I reached for her, not in a calculated, predatory way. It wasn't about sex. Not yet. It was instinct, desperation, grief meeting grief. She fell into me, her arms wrapping around my waist, her face burying into my chest like she needed to disappear. I held her tight, one hand in her hair, the other at her back, grounding us both. I feel like a fucking idiot, she muttered against me. You're not, I repeated. You're just the only one who didn't lie. Her breath hitched again, and then we just stood there, two people the world had pulled apart in the same way, finding comfort in the shape of each other. It was only a matter of time before it changed. Her head tilted up, her breath brushing my throat. Our faces were inches apart, and I could feel the tension shifting from sadness to something heavier, warmer, dangerous. I saw it in her eyes, pain laced with fire, lust tangled with resentment. The ache of betrayal, finding new focus. She kissed me first. Soft at first. Just a brush of lips, tentative, almost trembling. Then again, firmer, hungrier. I didn't stop her. I couldn't. Our mouths crashed together in a surge of everything we'd been holding back. Pain, anger, longing, it poured out of both of us, messy and uncontrolled. Her fingers threaded through my hair, tugging. Mine slid down her waist, gripping tight, pulling her against me like I needed her there to keep from falling. When she gasped, I kissed down her neck. When she moaned, I lost track of everything else. We stumbled back toward the couch, not breaking contact. Her tank top came off with one tug, paint smearing across her bare shoulder as I pulled it over her head. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. Her skin was warm and trembling beneath my hands, her breath hot in my ear as she whispered my name. Not as a plea, not as a question, but as a declaration. And God help me, I wanted it. I wanted her. Because in that moment, Paige wasn't Brooke's sister. She wasn't off limits. She wasn't part of the destruction. She was the only part of my life that felt real. We didn't go all the way. Not that night. But we crossed the line, no question. Hands on skin. Breathless gasps. Desperate clutches. We stopped before we lost ourselves completely, but barely. When it was over, we sat in silence. Her legs draped over mine, one of my hands resting lightly on her bare thigh. Paige looked at me then, her expression soft and unreadable. We shouldn't have done that. No, I said, but I don't regret it. She didn't answer, just leaned her head on my shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time, letting the moment hold us because nothing else could. Not yet. It was supposed to be just a painting. That's what she said when she called. I need a new subject, Paige told me. You're the only one I want to stare at right now. It sounded like a joke. Playful. Harmless. But I knew better, and I still said yes. When I walked into the studio again, it was different this time. The lights were dimmer, the music slower, something low and rhythmic that made the walls feel closer, the air thicker. She had rearranged the space, clearing a corner near the window and draping white sheets across the floor, the chair, even parts of the wall like she was preparing for a seance. Except the ritual wasn't about ghosts. It was about flesh. Want. Healing. Me. Shirt off, she said with a smirk, waving her brush like a wand. I raised an eyebrow. You want to paint me shirtless? She licked her lower lip unconsciously, then shrugged. I want to paint you honest. I pulled it off slowly, watching her watch me. Her eyes weren't hungry. Not yet, but focused, soaking in every detail. My chest, the lines of my shoulders, the curve of my neck. Sit, she said softly. I did. She worked in silence for a while. Brush strokes, pencil marks, stepping back, squinting. Her tongue peeked from the corner of her mouth as she concentrated, and something about it made my blood simmer. She was in her zone, barefoot again, jeans low on her hips, a streak of charcoal on her cheek like a signature. I couldn't stop watching her. You're staring, she said without looking up. So are you. Her mouth curved. That's the point. I shifted in the chair, suddenly aware of my breathing, of how my jeans felt tighter than they should. Paige walked around the easel, eyes scanning me like she was reading something only she understood. She stopped in front of me, only inches away. You're tense, she said, brushing a thumb across my jaw. You'd be tense too if you were half naked in front of your ex-wife's sister. Her expression darkened, not with anger but something deeper. You're not mine, she said, but you're not hers either. Not anymore. Her hand slid down on my chest, resting lightly over my heartbeat. You're this, she whispered. Warm. Alive. Here. She didn't see that. But I do. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was me, reaching for her waist. Or maybe she stepped between my legs before I could think stop her. But 1 second we were breathing each other in, and the next our lips met again. No hesitation this time. The kiss was slow at first. Deep. Lingering. Then it cracked open into something hotter. Her hands tangled in my hair. Mine slid beneath the hem of her shirt, fingers finding soft skin, the dip of her spine. I stood, lifting her with me, and she wrapped her legs around my waist without breaking the kiss. We moved toward the couch like it was magnetic. Her shirt came off first, then mine, her bra unclasped with one hand, and I took my time, watching her reaction as I kissed down her neck, down her collarbone, over her breast. She arched into me, fingers digging into my back. We didn't say a word. It wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. It wasn't about Brooke or Justin. This was something entirely ours. She pulled at my belt, her breath ragged now. "Tell me if I need to stop," she whispered. "Don't," I breathed. We came together like we'd been waiting for years. Skin on skin, breathless, and open and raw. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't choreographed or slow motion. It was messy, tangled, real. The kind of sex that pulls everything out of you and gives something new in return. She whispered my name against my throat as I moved inside her, her fingers locked around the back of my neck like she didn't want to let go. And I didn't want her to. Not in that moment. Not ever. When it was over, we didn't move for a long time. Her head rested on my chest, our bodies still slick with sweat, our breathing finally beginning to sink again. "I wasn't expecting that," she said finally, voice quiet but calm. "Which part?" I asked. She looked up. "The way you made me feel like I mattered." I brushed a strand of hair from her face, letting my thumb rest on her cheek. "You do matter, Paige." She blinked slowly, like she hadn't heard those words in a long time. We didn't say much more that night. We showered together, slow and gentle this time. I traced the curve of her shoulder with my lips. She kissed the scar on my ribs. Before I left, she walked me to the door, wearing only one of my old hoodies she must have found in a pile of things Brooke left behind years ago. "I want more," she said. My heart stuttered. "Of what?" "This," she said. "Of you. I don't care how fucked up it is. I just know I feel something when I'm with you that I haven't felt in a long time." I leaned in, kissed her once, soft, lingering. "We'll figure it out." And then I left. But as I drove away, the guilt started creeping in. Because I knew the storm was coming. And Brooke? She was already circling. I didn't expect him to show up at my place. I hadn't seen Justin in over a month. Not since the gallery exhibit. Not since the overheard conversation that turned my world inside out. After the confrontation with Brooke and everything that unfolded with Paige, I figured he'd keep his cowardly distance. But he didn't. He knocked on my door like he had a right to, like we were still brothers. I opened it, silent, jaw clenched. He stood there in jeans and a hoodie, sunglasses on even though the sun had already dipped behind the hills. His face was unreadable, but his posture wasn't. He was coiled like a spring wound too tight. "I heard," he said, voice clipped. I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "From Brooke. She told me," he said, stepping inside without asking. I didn't stop him. "She said you and Paige." He trailed off, then looked at me hard. "Is it true?" I shut the door behind him, slow. "What do you think?" His jaw worked, eyes narrowing. "So that's what this is? Revenge?" I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You fucked my wife, Justin. My wife. And you have the balls to walk in here and accuse me of revenge? You manipulated her," he snapped. "You didn't tell Paige what Brooke did. You waited until she was vulnerable. That's low, even for you. Even for me?" I took a step forward. "You spent months inside my marriage like it was your personal fucking sandbox. And I'm the one crossing lines? You think you're better than me?" He shot back, voice rising. "You were never around. Always working, always checked out. Brooke was miserable. You gave up on her long before I showed up. And that gave you permission to crawl in her bed?" "No," he said, quieter now. "It gave me the opportunity. She made the choice." We stood there for a long beat, breathing heavy, the air between us thick with heat and years of unspoken shit. This wasn't just about Brooke. This was about a lifetime of quiet competition. Mom always said I was the golden boy. Dad always said he had to look out for me. I was the responsible one. Justin was the charming screw-up. And now he was the charming screw-up who'd wreck my life. "Did you love her?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know. That's not good enough. It's all I've got," he said, eyes flashing. "She made me feel like I mattered." I swallowed the sudden surge of nausea. "You didn't matter to her." "Not really. You were just a way to get back at me." She said so herself. That shook him. His lips parted like he wanted to argue, but no words came. "She told Paige it was never going to last. That she never really wanted you." I said, cold now. Just something to distract her from being a coward. His nostrils flared. "Fuck you." You already did. That was it. He lunged. We crashed into the wall, fists flying. Years of resentment came out in one savage burst. I don't know who threw the first punch. I just know I stopped holding back. He tackled me into the hallway table, and we both hit the floor hard. I caught him in the jaw. He split my lip. We grappled like animals, fueled by betrayal and blood. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every holiday where I played the responsible big brother while he coasted. Every time he lied and got away with it. Every time I looked the other way because he was family. But not this time. This time, there was no forgiveness waiting on the other side of the fight. Eventually, I got on top, fist drawn back. I froze. He looked up at me, bleeding, breathing hard, hate in his eyes, but beneath all that, I saw it. Guilt, shame, maybe even fear. I stood slowly, chest heaving. Get out. Justin didn't move. Get the fuck out of my house. He rolled over, groaning, blood on his shirt, and stumbled toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back one last time. She'll never love you, he said. Paige, you know that, right? I didn't answer, because maybe I didn't need her to love me. Maybe I just needed someone who didn't lie when they looked me in the eye. He left, slamming the door behind him. I sank to the floor, heart pounding, bruised and bleeding. It was over. But the wreckage? That was just beginning. That night, Paige came over. She didn't knock, just walked in like she had the right to. She saw my face, the cut above my eye, the swelling lip. Jesus, she whispered, rushing to me. What happened? Justin, I muttered, leaning back against the wall. Her eyes darkened. What did he say? That I manipulated you. That you'd never love me. That I wasn't better than him. She stared at me for a long time, then lowered herself to the floor beside me. You are better than him, she said. And as for love, I don't know yet, but I don't want to run from what this is. I looked at her then, bruised and broken and still somehow breathing. I don't want to run either, I said. She kissed me. Slow, careful, not desperate like before. Just real. We didn't have answers yet, but we finally stopped lying to ourselves. We didn't sneak around anymore. The morning after the fight with Justin, Paige showed up with coffee, no makeup, and a bandage in her purse. She stood in my kitchen, looked me in the eye, and said, I don't care who knows anymore. And that was it. We stopped pretending this was temporary. Stopped using words like complicated and gray area. We didn't know anyone grace who didn't offer it in return. Brooke found out 3 days later. She came to the house in a silk blouse and oversized sunglasses, the same armor she wore when she was trying to appear composed. She walked in uninvited, then froze in the doorway. Paige was curled up on the couch in one of my hoodies, barefoot, sketchbook in her lap. My arm was draped casually over the backrest behind her. The intimacy wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Brooke's sunglasses came off, revealing bloodshot eyes rimmed with mascara. So it's true, she said. Her voice didn't shake. That was always her thing, breaking people calmly. It is, I said. She looked at Paige like she didn't recognize her anymore. I trusted you, she said. You were my sister. Paige stood slowly, spine straight. You lost the right to say that when you slept with his brother. Brooke blinked, stunned. This is different. No, I cut in. It's exactly the same, except we didn't lie about it. We didn't hide it, and we didn't tear down a marriage to make it happen. I didn't mean to. Stop, I said. Just stop. We're not doing this anymore. You don't get to rewrite the story just because you're no longer the victim. She looked like she wanted to scream, but the cracks were already forming in her face. I came to apologize, she said finally. To say I'm sorry. For what I did. For all of it. I stood there, arms crossed, heart slow. Then say it. But don't expect me to take it back. She looked between us. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. I ruined everything, she whispered. And now you're with her? I didn't choose her because of what you did, I said. I chose her in spite of it. That hit her. She turned to Paige. Does this even feel right to you? Paige didn't flinch. It feels like the only real thing I've touched in years. Brooke nodded once, like she'd heard enough. Then she left, quietly for once. And for the first time since the night of the gallery, I felt something close to peace settle in my chest. Later that week, Justin called. I didn't pick up. He left a voicemail, his voice low, defeated. I just wanted you to know. Brooke and I ended it. She said she never really loved me. Said I was a mistake. I guess I deserve that. He paused. I never meant to lose my brother. I deleted the message. Some bridges burn on their own. Others you have to set fire to with your own hands. The fallout didn't stop there. My mother called after Brooke visited her, sobbing, spinning a version of events where Paige seduced me as part of some revenge plot. Paige and I sat at the table while I told my mother the truth. Every uncomfortable piece. She was silent for a long time. And then, softly, "You deserve to be happy. I'm sorry you had to go through this." That meant more than I expected. Other people weren't as gracious. Some friends pulled away, unsure how to navigate the aftermath. Lines were drawn, judgments made. But I didn't care anymore. The people who stayed were the ones who mattered. Paige and I moved slowly. Not because we were unsure, but because we wanted to do it right. There was no guilt anymore, just caution. Mutual respect. Nights spent wrapped around each other, not just in bed, but in conversation, in laughter, in being. She painted me again. But this time it wasn't raw and broken. It was warm, sunlight on skin, strength behind eyes. She titled it Still Standing. I asked her what it meant. "You," she said. "After everything, you're still standing." So was she. We started making plans. Not grand declarations, not future timelines. Just small things. A trip up the coast. A gallery show. Sundays where we cooked together. Nights where we curled up and said nothing at all. And for the first time in years, I looked at someone and didn't wonder if they'd leave. Paige was the one who'd stayed, even when she had every reason not to. I never thought peace would feel like this. Not like a fireworks moment. Not a grand speech or some sweeping gesture where the music swells and the credits roll. No, peace crept in slowly. It came in the mornings. Waking up beside Paige, sunlight caught in the mess of her hair, one leg slung lazily over mine. Her breath slow and steady. The way she smiled before even opening her eyes, like she'd dreamed of something soft and woke up next to something real. It came in the quiet. No more checking phones when they buzzed. No more lies hanging like smoke in the room. No more wondering who she was texting or where she was going. It came in laughter, unfiltered, genuine, bubbling out of nowhere over dumb things. Like how I burned her eggs 3 times in 1 week, or the time she painted a self-portrait that accidentally looked more like Danny DeVito. It came in the art. Paige's new gallery opened 2 months after we went public. Her theme was reclamation. 10 pieces, 10 stories, 10 windows into pain and healing. One of them was mine. A massive canvas, abstract but familiar. Harsh lines softening toward the center. Crimson fading into gold. A silhouette of a man walking forward, not looking back. The plaque beside it read, "Resurrected, not rebuilt, reborn." People whispered when they passed it. Some nodded knowingly. A few stared too long, like they felt something in it they couldn't name. I stood off to the side during the opening, sipping wine while Paige did the rounds. She was radiant, confident, a little messy in all the ways I loved. At one point, she caught my eye from across the room, then winked like we shared a secret no one else would understand. And we did. Later, we slipped outside together, escaping the noise of the crowd. "You crushed it in there," I said, leaning against the wall beside her. She smirked. "You mean we did?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Her paint-stained nails, her fierce eyes, the way she wore both pain and pride like layered jewelry. "You ever think about how we got here?" I asked. How fucked up and insane it all was. She nodded. "Every day. And you still want this?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Even knowing it came from betrayal? From wreckage? She turned toward me, stepping in close, her hands sliding under my jacket. "What matters isn't where it came from," she said. "It's what we do with it now." And then she kissed me. Not soft, not tentative. It was a kiss that said we'd been through hell, that we'd survived, that we were still figuring it out, but we were figuring it out together. Brooke moved away a few weeks later. She left a note. I didn't read it. I didn't need to. Some stories don't need a final chapter. Some doors once shut stay that way. Justin? I don't know where he is. Haven't heard from him. Don't want to. Family's not defined by blood anyway. It's defined by who shows up when everything burns. And Paige showed up. Every single time. We didn't try to fix the broken things around us. We just decided to build something new, from scratch, on our terms. Truthfully, it's wild how life reroutes you when you least expect it. You spend years building towards something, thinking it's your forever, only to have it shattered in an instant. But sometimes what comes after the break is better. Not perfect, just real. And that's all I ever wanted. Not a fantasy, not the illusion of love, but the real thing. Paige and I don't talk much about Brooke anymore, or Justin, or what we lost, because we've gained more. Trust, peace, honesty, each other. And every day we wake up to this new life, we're reminded of the same simple truth. We're not broken. We're just finally free.